Good morning, friends. Father Frank Pavone here, National Director of Priests for Life. It is Valentine's Day, February the 14th. God bless you all and happy Valentine's Day. You know, the symbol of love, the best symbol of love is not the heart, it's the crucifix. Jesus giving himself away so that we might have life. That's what everyone who loves needs to do. Whatever vocation they have, priesthood, religious life, lay, single life, married life, we give ourselves away to those that God puts in our path to love and to serve. We give ourselves away for the good of the other person. Now, this evil that we're fighting in abortion is exactly the opposite of love. Love says, I sacrifice myself for the good of the other person. Abortion says, I sacrifice the other person for the good of myself. Well, there is a lot going on in terms of fighting abortion, and we're going to talk about some special actions that were taken last night in the United States Congress, and I'm going to show you the speeches that were given. We're going to look at that because it was all sparked by this concern over late-term abortion, a topic we've been focusing on for decades, telling people that this is the way that we shake our nation loose from abortion, and that is show people the most obvious aspect of it that is wrong, the abortion of these babies right before birth, and even the killing of these babies after birth if they are born as a result of a failed abortion. So we're going to get into that in just a moment. Let's begin with prayer. My book, Pro-Life Reflections for Every Day, which I hope you have your copy of, Pro-Life Reflections for Everyday.com is where you can get it. The reflection here for Valentine's Day starts with a quote from Romans 16:16, greet one another with a holy kiss. On Valentine's Day, many messages of affection are exchanged. A culture of life avoids two extremes. One, which looks down on all affection and thinks that the only good things are the things of the Spirit. And on the other, which allows the emotions to run out of control with no discipline. Let us pray. Holy Spirit, font of love, both human and divine, bless us today with understanding, balance, and grace. Enable us to devote ourselves to the service of God and neighbor. Amen. Well, brothers and sisters, when there's a matter of particular importance, at times the United States Congress will call what is called a special order, a series of speeches based on a particular topic of importance. Last night, that took place in regard to the issue of abortion, especially late-term abortion. And I want to show you the special order. I want to show you the speeches. We'll watch them together here. And they can be found on our website, endabortion.us. And I want to also call you to action today, not only to watch these speeches, but to spread them, share them in any and every way you can, and thank these representatives for making these speeches. Now, these representatives, of course, are just a fraction of the solid, good, strong pro-life representatives that we have in Congress. But as you'll see, these are all Republicans. The Democrats, unfortunately, with about a handful of exceptions, the Democrats in Congress are all pro-abortion, even pro-late-term abortion. They've even been blocking a bill to save children who are born alive after abortion. I don't know what's wrong with them. Let's ask them. But the point is, that's what we have to do. We have to be in communication with these people. The kind of representatives you're going to see now, let's thank them for what they have said and what they are doing. The ones who are in favor of abortion, let's challenge them. This special order was pulled together by Representative Jackie Walorski, a Republican from Indiana. And the following members you're going to see now joined in the special order. Ann Wagner of Missouri, Chris Smith of New Jersey, Vicky Hartzler of Missouri, Jaime Herrera Butler from Washington, Martha Roby from Alabama, Virginia Fox, North Carolina, Kathy McMorris Rogers, Washington, Carol Miller, West Virginia, Greg Pence, Indiana, Ross Spano, Florida, Tim Burchett, Tennessee, Roger Marshall, Kansas, Chris Stewart, Utah, John Rutherford, Florida, Jim Baird, Indiana, Tim Walberg, Michigan, Ralph Norman, South Carolina, Bill Johnson, Ohio, Darren LaHood, Illinois, Mark Walker, North Carolina, Rick Allen from Georgia, and Pete Olson from Texas. Let's listen now to these great speeches made on the floor of the House last night in regard to abortion.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of this special order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today alongside my colleagues to speak out against the radical and dangerous policies being pursued by Democratic leadership and state legislators across the country. In New York, a new law legalizes what amounts to infanticide, allowing abortions up to and even after birth for almost any reason, and ends the safeguards that protect babies born alive after an abortion attempt. In Virginia, a similar bill is under consideration that could lead to babies being denied life-saving medical care. As Governor Ralph Northam put it, quote, "The infant would be kept comfortable and then a discussion would ensue," close quote. I think this is sickening. That's why my colleagues and I have called for the House vote on H.R. 962, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, a common sense bill to require that medical care, just medical care, be provided to children who survive a failed abortion. Sadly, Democratic leadership in the House is standing in the way, refusing even to allow an up or down vote on this issue. This is not a partisan issue, it's simply what's right. What's right? We've got to stand together against this radical and inhumane agenda. We must act to protect the rights of all infants. I'm grateful to be joined in this call by so many of my colleagues.
I thank my friend from Missouri. In 2012, Ashley and Tony Bo Cardenas got the best news parents could hear. They're going to have a baby girl. They got an ultrasound at 16 weeks. They saw the outlines of their new daughter, Audrina. She was gorgeous. They had pure joy. Right after they left, the sonographer rushes to call the obstetrician. This little gift from God has ectopia cordis. Her heart is outside of her body. 6 to 8 human beings out of 1 million have this condition, and it's usually fatal. The doctors tell Ashley she has 2 choices: either abort Audrina or keep going and pray for the best. Ashley had to act quickly because Texas law prohibited abortion after 20 weeks. This happened at 17 weeks. She felt Audrina in her womb, kicking and thriving. And she thought, quote, "Who wants to take a life away? Who wants to stop a beating heart?" That is true love. Audrina was born alive. Ashley saw her, gave her a kiss, and then she was rushed off to the cardiac intensive room for babies, the ICU. Little Audrina had surgery the very next day. Here's a picture of her I printed out in the hospital. That beautiful young girl, her heart behind that plate. Her first year of life, there are wires everywhere. She was on oxygen and had to eat through a feeding tube. But here that beautiful girl is today with a sign that says, "Speak now for the kids." This is a sign for Audrina and for every kid facing abortion. Congress, Americans, people, speak now for the kids. Support the bill. Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. Don't kill babies. I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman Walorski, for your efforts in organizing, Jackie, for your efforts in organizing this important special order. You know, as the, Madam Speaker, as the proud father of 4 and grandfather of 13, I rise here this evening joined by many of my Republican colleagues to recognize that we have a moral duty and obligation to protect the most vulnerable among us, those who cannot yet protect or speak for themselves. But as we stand here tonight, Democrats in state legislatures across the country are celebrating legislation to deny medical care to an innocent baby who is born alive after a failed abortion. And we cannot stand idly by and allow this to happen. How have we come to this point in our country where infanticide is something we disagree on? Each and every one of us has a right to life, even an innocent, newly born gift from God, and I will continue to stand up and fight for that right to life every step of the way. We must continue to be proactive in bringing common sense pro-life legislation to the House floor, and I hope to have an opportunity to offer my full support for these bills and protect the sanctity of life. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Walorski. Jackie, if I may, thank you for your leadership in showing courage on this important topic. The Born Alive Survivors Protection Act protects the lives of babies who survive abortions by requiring the healthcare practitioner to save the life of the baby. Sounds pretty much common sense, doesn't it? I'm a proud co-sponsor of Ms. Ann Wagner's bill fighting for the sanctity of life. As a former pastor, I value each and every life that is brought into this world, and that is why it is imperative that we pass this legislation and put an end to the senseless murders of innocent babies. Earlier this week, I asked for the unanimous consent before being gavelled out to bring the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act to the House floor for a vote. Unfortunately, my Democratic colleagues put their party leadership and affiliation over voting for what is morally right. The statistics are staggering. In just looking at a few states, we found 25 children that were born alive that survived a botched abortion just in 2017. It's concerning to think how much higher those numbers would be if we looked throughout the entire country. Simply put, I stand with 80% of Americans who support legislation to protect the life of a baby who survives a failed abortion. At a time when states like New York and Virginia are matching abortion laws of North Korea and making it easier to perform abortions until the birth of a child, it is absolutely necessary for us to stand in unity and fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. With that, I yield back.
Well, thank you. I want to say thanks to Jackie Walorski, my colleague on the Ways and Means Committee, for yielding me the time and for your leadership in putting together this special order and your tireless fight for life. Mr. Speaker, I come to the floor today in defense of life and the unborn. Over the last few weeks, we've witnessed extreme abortion views pushed in states across the country. In New York, the state legislature passed and the governor signed into law an abortion bill so broad it effectively allows abortion on demand until birth, while removing protections for infants born alive during an abortion. Barbaric legislation such as this is nothing to cheer about. In Virginia, the governor tried to soften the blow of his infanticide endorsement by saying, quote, the infant would be kept comfortable, unquote, while a decision was made on whether to abort the infant. These disturbing and extreme trends seeping into the mainstream of the Democratic platform underscore the need for its leaders in Congress to stand up to fight for life in the face of these abhorrent actions. Now more than ever, leaders in Washington need to stand up for life. I stand committed with the millions of pro-life advocates around the country to make sure infanticide is condemned and the voiceless are given a voice. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a proud father of 4 and a grandfather of 6, I rise today in strong support of those who cannot defend themselves, the most innocent and defenseless among us, the unborn. I share the pro-life views of those I serve in eastern and southeastern Ohio. A few weeks ago, many Ohioans joined more than 100,000 pro-life Americans at the annual March for Life here in Washington, D.C. Although with so little national media coverage of this major event, some may have missed this passionate and growing movement made up of men and women, boys and girls from all walks of life. Recently, we have witnessed the inhuman policies introduced by multiple states permitting late-term abortions, even, unbelievably, all the way up to birth. It's past time that Congress pass legislation banning this horrific practice. I strongly urge my colleagues on both sides to reject infanticide and defend the sanctity of human life. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentlelady from Indiana. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to raise my voice for those who have no voice. You know, while we may have disagreements in this chamber, I never thought I would have to come to this floor for this reason, to denounce the killing of children after they have been born. But I'm here today because one of our nation's governors has endorsed infanticide in all but name. Even though the media may be distracted by the governor's latest scandal, I refuse to allow this atrocity to be ignored. It is wrong, plain and simple. I wish to live in a nation where we respect the sanctity of all human life, where condemning the murder of a child is not for debate, but a matter of course. Until then, I will not stand by silently. I will continue to cut out those who attempt to corrupt our values, whether through state laws allowing abortion on demand or governors condemning abortion. These actions do not represent the values of the American people. They represent the views of a small but powerful group of ideologues with no respect for the sanctity of life or the rights for the voiceless. I find it bizarre that the party of birthright citizenship will not endorse the birthright to life. I yield back my time.
I thank the gentlelady for taking on this issue when we've heard words such as the governor of Virginia and others who would say that it's okay for a male governor of Virginia to make a statement, but generally men should not be talking about something that is only given to women to talk about because it's about their bodies, about their lives. Well, it is, but I think we need to talk as well. And if it's not me who should talk, I would like to read for you the statements of another individual who I think expresses all I would want to say this evening. And I read just a few excerpts from an article he wrote. He said, "Do you want us to let him go?" Those were the first words that were spoken over me as I came into the world. Those were the words of my delivery room doctor as he held my armless and lifeless body in his arms. As he assessed me and my situation, all he could tell my parents is that I was not viable. That was the words of Daniel Ritchie as he spoke about his birth. He said, not bad for a kid that wasn't supposed to lead a full life. And why did he say that? He says, it's almost 35 years since these words were spoken over me, and a lot has happened since then. By God's grace, I was revived. I learned to feed myself, dress myself, write, type, and drive, all with my feet. I graduated from high school with honors and double majored in college. I met the girl of my dreams, got married 13 years ago, and we have 2 beautiful kids. Now I'm a sought-after speaker who shares his story at conferences, churches, schools, colleges, and with corporations across the country. Not bad for a kid that wasn't supposed to lead a full life. Viability and independence are terrible indicators of life. I'm no less of a man because of my 2 vacant sleeves. I'm a perfect creation crafted by the hands of a careful creator. I'm not the sum of my missing parts. I'm a man that God has made with talents, gifts, and abilities, just like any other person who is born blind, deaf, or paralyzed is the same gift. And he ended by saying this: we are all made in God's image. We are all given talents and abilities. We're all worth being given a chance at life, no matter how small the chance may be. And I am living example of that. My armless life is worth living, and I am beyond thankful my parents saw that one day, and I was viable. I yield back.
Thank you, Jackie. And I just want to say thank you and appreciate all your efforts regarding this issue. But, Mr. Speaker, I rise here today to voice a concern over the actions taking place in New York, Virginia, and across the country that directly threaten the sanctity of life. These proposals are far beyond what Hoosiers in my community and most folks around the country believe is right. That's why I'm proud to co-sponsor House Resolution 962, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. This legislation will make it illegal to kill babies that are born alive after surviving an attempted abortion. The degradation of life in this country is deeply concerning. Congress needs to step up and do what's right. The extreme views of some should not overwhelm the common sense majority of millions of Americans. Protecting the sanctity of life is something I will continue to fight for to ensure that those without a voice can be heard and their lives spared. And I yield back my time.
I thank the gentlelady from Indiana for yielding and appreciate this opportunity to speak for life.
Thanks for coming.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today because there are actually elected leaders in this country, in the United States of America, who believe a baby can be left to die after having been born alive. How is this even a debate in the United States of America? When did murder become a partisan issue? Some on the other side of the aisle call this parental choice in health care. But Mr. Speaker, I tell you that infanticide is murder, not health care. And abortion is not the answer to a preborn child's physical or mental disability. But don't just take it from me. Listen to the words of Mr. Frank Stevens, who was actually born with Down syndrome and leads a remarkable life, a life worth living. He had this to say about abortion, and I quote, "On abortion, I don't want to make it illegal. I want to make it unthinkable. Politicians change laws. I want to change people's hearts." Mr. Speaker, I want to partner with Frank Stevens because I believe that we can do both, making late-term abortion unthinkable and illegal.
And thank you, Ms. Wolarski, for carrying this special order. And you listen to our colleagues, and it's hard to listen to. It's hard to listen to this and not just feel overwhelmed by it. Some things are so emotional, and some things are so obvious that there are times when you just speak from the heart. 1 week ago tonight, little baby Dawson was born to my family. A beautiful little baby boy, my 6th grandson. It is unbelievable to me that someone would argue that you could take that child moments before birth, pull him from his mother's protection and destroy that life, take away any chance he has of having any happiness in this world, take away any chance he has of being loved in this world, that you would suggest that and not call it evil. That we could have this conversation like the Virginia governor who said, well, we'll take that infant, we'll make them comfortable while we decide how we're going to kill it. How could you have that conversation and not call it evil? If you think that's okay, go make that argument to the American people. But while you're making that argument, be honest. Yes, this is a baby. Yes, it is moments from birth. In some cases, the child has been delivered. It is alive, laying there before you. Yes, you are going to kill it. Most Americans find that repulsive. Most Americans find it unbelievable that we're having this conversation. Most Americans find it evil. Please help us save these children.
Thank you so much for the gentlelady to yield. Mr. Speaker, since I was a freshman in high school, I wanted to become a physician. I was blessed to get to do that, and by the time of my second year in medical school, my wife and I had our first daughter, and most of us were trying to decide what type of doctor we were going to be. And the moment that little girl was born, I knew that I wanted to spend my medical career delivering babies. I think my wife can attest that for the next 30 years of my life, most of my waking moments were spent with somebody in labor. So blessed to get to participate in that wonderful moment. I was blessed to get to go to Congress and represent the people of Kansas, and woke up a couple weeks ago to the cheering of state legislators from New York and their governor. And I turned the volume up to see what the fuss was. And the fuss was they were celebrating their ability to murder the same babies that I've been trying to protect and deliver for the last 30 years of my life. I don't think there's any Americans, I've never met an American who would think that it's right to murder a baby moments, days, or weeks before its due date. It's the most barbaric law I've ever heard of in our society. And if this wasn't enough, I turned the news on a week later, and now they're talking about murdering babies after they were born from so-called failed abortions. I cannot believe that I live in a society that would even think about this. So I went to my office the next day, and I got my staff together and said, look, we've got some legislation that's going to take care of this. We have our born survivor abortion bill that protects babies after they're born, and then we have a pain-capable bill as well to protect babies who are able to feel pain from being aborted. And my staff looked at me, right, we've got that legislation. And I said, well, all we'll need is 20 or 30 Democrats to sign on to this. Surely the Speaker of the House is against late-term abortion. Surely she's against infanticide. But my staff looked at me with bewildering eyes and said, Congressman, I don't think we're going to find any Democrats to do that. And if I could I want to just talk a second about the moms, too. No one is talking about how horrible this is going to be for mothers. Moms are going to die from these late-term abortions. As an obstetrician, I never did an abortion, but guess who takes care of complications from abortions? It's obstetricians. I remember the first week I was in residency, and I was called to the emergency room. And there before me was a lady in shock, and I apologize if this is too graphic, but this situation's so graphic I have to tell you the details. This young lady was bleeding out buckets of blood. And I found out what had happened is she just had an abortion done hours before, now she was hemorrhaging. And I looked at the nurse, I said, you know, what's going on here? And I knew that we needed to take her to the operating room and to find out during the procedure that a piece of that baby was still inside her uterus, and the uterus couldn't clamp down, so she was hemorrhaging. This is a story I would see over and over again. The later the abortion procedure is done in the pregnancy, the more often we're going to see this. People are going to get perforated uteruses. It's going to be catastrophic for women. Mr. Speaker, we can't allow this to continue. And with that, I yield back.
I rise to join my colleagues in advocating for the unborn. This country was founded to preserve our inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Abortion, the murder of innocent children, cannot coexist with our fundamental beliefs. Late-term abortion is particularly brutal. It includes tearing limbs from bodies and stopping beating hearts. Only 7 countries, including China and North Korea, have legalized this practice. The United States, Mr. Speaker, should not be in that same category as known human rights abusers. Proponents of abortion claim pro-life policy is an attack on women's rights, but doctors have determined late-term abortions, Mr. Speaker, endanger the mother more than giving birth. The best way to protect women's rights is to protect life. And I close with a little story. Before my mama left this earth to meet her Savior, she was in and out of consciousness, Mr. Speaker. And at one point, she had talked to her father who'd passed away long before, and her brother who'd passed away in the Second World War, and my daddy who'd gone before her just a couple of years prior. And she talked about, she was looking off into the corner, and I said, "What are you looking at, Mama?" And she said, "Baby, I'm looking at all those sweet little babies up there." Mr. Speaker, I firmly believe that my mother was looking at some babies that had been murdered. And I urge my colleagues to stand with me to protect the unborn. By doing so, we defend the inalienable rights of all Americans. Thank you, and I yield back my time, gentlelady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to enthusiastically support Congressman Wagner's Born Alive bill, a bill that would protect children born after a failed abortion from further attempts on their lives. This is not a liberal or conservative issue. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is not a political issue even. It is a moral issue, and moral issues have a way of being undeniable. It is a universal truth that laws protect the living. And while many of us cannot agree when life begins, I'm confident that everyone in this House would agree that life begins at least at birth. And more importantly, I'm confident that the vast majority of the American people would agree that a child born alive is in fact alive. I understand there may be attempts to prevent a vote on this bill to protect members who are against the Born Alive bill, but no, it is impossible to protect politicians from the moral convictions of the American people, and history is unkind to those who try. I urge members from both parties to see the Born Alive bill as an opportunity to foster bipartisanship in this House. Supporting this bill does not make you anti-abortion or against a woman's right to choose.
Time has expired.
It simply ensures that laws already in place are enforced to protect the most vulnerable among us.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I yield back the balance of my time.
I rise today to reaffirm my unwavering commitment to life, the protection of the unborn, and the protection of those who survive the violence of the unborn. The greatness of our free society can best be measured by how it cares for the most vulnerable. I'm deeply troubled by the efforts by some to expand late-term abortion and remove any conceivable limits on this horrific practice. In the face of such an onslaught, let the miracles of conception, pregnancy, childbirth serve as a solemn reminder of the constant fight for life. On this, there should be no question that members of Congress from both parties should agree to the fact that every child born into this world has the right to live. We must stand together for life and the unborn and protect those who cannot protect themselves when handed abortion's death sentence. I pray that one day each and every life, born and unborn, is respected, valued, and given the chance to pursue his or her dreams. That's why I am proud co-sponsor of H.R. 962. We must never, ever give up in the fight for life. Thank you, and I yield back the remainder of my time to my fellow Hoosier, Mrs. Wolarski.
I rise today to stand for life. I am a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. I have felt life quicken in my womb. I know the blessing of children, all of whom are created in God's image. And that is why I am so saddened by the pro-abortion discussions taking place around the country and in places like New York, Virginia, and others, where state legislatures are debating and legalizing abortion all the way up to birth, and in some cases, after a child is born. I am sickened that laws are being written which allow for a baby who survives an abortion attempt to no longer receive support and care once they are born. This is infanticide. There is no other way to say it. This is an affront to life. We must demand more from our country and our citizens. We must ensure protections for the youngest and most innocent of our citizens, both inside and outside the womb. We must take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. We must take care of our children. We must take care of and respect and cherish life.
Thank you so much. I rise to join my colleagues this afternoon in celebrating the dignity and the value of every human life. I'm a mom of 3 young kids, Cole, Grace, and Bryn, and I can testify that becoming a mom, bringing a life into the world, is the most amazing thing ever. And with technology today, we can look into the womb. We can see day by day how a baby is developing. It's a miracle to witness, and it's proof that we as human beings are not defined by our limits. We are empowered by the potential that we have and who we can become. So, Mr. Speaker, I am frightened and I am heartbroken that anyone would oppose the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act led by Congresswoman Ann Wagner. Just as the science is undeniable, it should be unthinkable to deny life-saving care to a newborn baby. Unthinkable. We have amazing technology. We can do more than ever. It is limitless. I urge my colleagues across the aisle to take a step back, to look at this science and let this bill come to the floor. It's the right thing to do. You know, since our founding, we have been a country that cherishes every person's inalienable human right, and it's the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's in all of us to uphold those values and ensure that we are protecting the dignity of every person as God intended. So thank you, Congresswoman Jackie Walorski, for your leadership. Thank you for bringing us all together so that we could be warriors of human dignity and human value.
I want to thank my colleague and distinguished member from Indiana, Congresswoman Walorski, for leading this special order tonight, and to all of my colleagues who are here to affirm life, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, abortion advocates used to say they wanted abortion to be, quote, safe, legal, and rare, end quote. Now abortion advocates have reached new levels of disregard for new human lives by openly promoting infanticide. And legislation that would prohibit doctors from leaving born-alive infants to die cannot even get a vote under this new majority in this House of Representatives. Bills such as the Reproductive Health Act, RHA, which was recently passed with celebration in New York, are starkly at odds with reasonable limits on abortion that most Americans support, and exposes the extreme agenda of the pro-abortion movement. The RHA would expand upon Roe v. Wade's already wide protections for access to abortion. In New York, an abortionist no longer needs to be a licensed physician, and if an abortion is not successful and the child is born alive, the law offers no protections for the life of the baby. It's almost unthinkable, Mr. Speaker. Such a horrifying bill should be met with disgust and outrage, not celebrated. It's clear that the value of life has eroded in our culture. Without a society that questions, quote, what are the rights of the unborn, end quote, legislators can use their power to eliminate the right to life and promote the idea that life is dispensable. Proponents of the New York and similar Virginia legislation should ask whether these policies truly reflect a society where women are valued or where unwanted babies are worthy of protection. In a culture where aborted babies are collateral damage in so-called women's health care, we should all fear that following unborn children and newborns, there will soon be new targets for disposal.
Good evening. I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I thank you for leading this very, very special order tonight. And this topic is critically important, especially in light of the heartbreaking news we've already referenced that has come out of New York and Virginia in the recent weeks. But I want to start by thanking the gentlelady from Washington for standing up tonight and telling us her story. You do have an amazing story. You have an amazing family, a loving husband, Dan, and Ethan and Abigail, and this is a family, and so we know each other's children. And I can tell you that walking through that journey with you as your friend and your colleague has been so special to Riley and to me and to our children, Margaret and George, who love them just the same. And so thank you so much for standing on the floor tonight and having the courage to tell your amazing story. And it means a lot. So thank you for that. Of course, I was stunned to hear the boisterous cheering upon the New York State Legislature's passage of a bill that would significantly loosen restrictions on late-term abortions. Meanwhile, in Virginia, the Democratic governor recently threw his support behind similar legislation and made comments that served as a horrific defense of born-alive abortions. For the purposes of tonight's discussion, we got to call born-alive abortion what it is, and it's infanticide. Here in Congress, part of our job is to debate the issues. Our dialogue surrounding legislation is critically important, a critically important component of the democratic process in this country. Still, no matter how our stances on abortion may vary, I hope we can all agree that if an abortion fails and a child is born alive, the child must be given the same medical care that any other living, breathing infant would otherwise be given. I want to take this opportunity to reassure the people I represent in Alabama that I remain unapologetically pro-life. I believe that life begins at conception, and I am opposed to abortion at any stage. I am severely disturbed that this country now requires written legal provision to protect living babies. But sadly, in the aftermath of this news coming out of New York and Virginia, it is clear that this step is immediately necessary. That's why I'm proud that the House of Representatives have wasted no time in acting, and I especially appreciate my colleagues, Mr. Scalise and Ms. Wagner, who have been working tirelessly to force a vote on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, a bill I co-sponsor, that would protect babies who are born alive during failed abortion procedures. Again, to my colleague, thank you so much for organizing and having this special hour tonight. This is a critically important issue, and I hope we will continue to have these discussions, not just tonight, but in the days moving forward.
Thank you. It is a privilege to get to be here on this floor, and I get to share my story. You know, in mid-2013, my husband Dan and I went in for our 20-week ultrasound as excited first-time parents. We were not prepared for what we were told. We were told our unborn baby had a 0% chance at survival. There were no kidneys. It was a condition called bilateral renal agenesis, or Potter's syndrome, and as a result, our baby would either miscarry or be born unable to breathe because her lungs wouldn't develop. She would literally suffocate upon arrival if we brought her to term. I, of course, was encouraged from physicians to abort my baby. And while there are many reasons that lead women to make that decision, Dr. Jennifer Gunter, who's a women's health advocate, asserts that, quote, terminations after 24 weeks are for severe fetal anomalies. Now, our baby's diagnosis wasn't just severe. It was without any glimmer of hope. And being told that that wriggling, alive, kicking child in your stomach will certainly die, it doesn't just take the breath out of your lungs. It's like hell screaming in your face. And it leaves fear. Miraculously, our doctors were wrong. We pushed forward with that pregnancy and were successful. We'd seen something happen that had never happened before. My baby developed lungs in utero without kidneys. It was an impossible outcome to the medical world at that time. You know, in good faith, our doctors had given us their honest professional opinions. But guess what? Doctors aren't infallible. Well, we wouldn't have known this if we hadn't tried to overcome this diagnosis. And through divine intervention and some amazing doctors who were willing to charter new waters, literally, we now get to experience our daughter, Abigail, who's holding the Bible for the swearing in here, standing next to me, and Speaker Pelosi. A healthy, happy 5-year-old who has, she's a big sister, and she says someday she's going to be the boss of mommy's work. Look out, Speaker Pelosi. So since our story became public, I've talked to moms all over the world who, like me, carry their babies into the 2nd and 3rd trimesters hoping to deliver and then are given devastating diagnoses. But what if the doctor is wrong about their babies too? Abigail was the first to survive her condition, but because of her breakthrough, she's not the only survivor now. Radical legislation in New York and Virginia have recently brought late-term or partial birth abortion into the spotlight. But what if we use this discussion to go on the offensive against the potential disease instead of attacking the pregnancy itself? Some parents have been presented with scary prenatal tests that can produce false alarms. These same earnest, loving would-be parents have made permanent decisions based on what could be incorrect information. What if the baby won't have that significant health condition or disability after all? Or even if she does, what about the loving families eager to raise a child in anticipation of her living a full and fulfilling life? We got to hear Frank Stevens, an exceptionally joy-filled disability champion with Down syndrome, describe at a congressional hearing how he is, quote, a medical gift to society and that his extra chromosome might lead to the answer for Alzheimer's. Science bears this out. Our society celebrates the term diversity. Shouldn't that mean full diversity, which includes all physical and mental abilities, or disabilities as some call? We step onto very shaky ground when we start deciding who lives or dies based on one's abilities, or possibly lack thereof, in utero. Because despite our best intentions, or the best intentions of the messenger, doctor or otherwise, there is a limit to what science can predict. And that's not naivete speaking. That's coming from a mom of a child who was given a 0% chance of survival based on what was, at the time, sound science. Excuse me. Now, this kiddo has a full adult life ahead of her. Gosh, and those of us who know her are privileged immeasurably. And you know what? Every single child, regardless of their ability, has that same potential if we'll only give them that chance. I believe that care and understanding and compassion are needed at every stage of a woman's maternal journey. But to me, that means empowering mothers to dwell in the realm of the possible, not the impossible, even if it's never been tried before. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, lady. I appreciate so much your leadership in bringing this subject up here to the floor and to the American people and to our colleagues. It is deeply disturbing to see what is happening across this country as life is no longer valued and babies are allowed to be killed, their life snuffed out in the final moments before they are born and after they are born. I, like my colleague from Kansas before me, was shocked when I turned on my TV very similarly, and I'm sure there's people all across this country that did that, to see the governor of New York sitting at his table signing this bill and having all of these women celebrate it, and then even have a building in New York City lit up in honor of this celebration. But what were they celebrating? They were celebrating not only the demise of human lives in late-term abortion when, as the Dr. Marshall said, they could be born alive in a hospital and given medical care and have a productive full life, but they could have permission to have that life snuffed out, but then to have it, the death perhaps of the woman as well at the hands of this procedure. A lot of people are unfamiliar of how a late-term abortion is done and what these individuals in New York were celebrating. But it is graphic, but people need to know what happens. The woman's uterus is dilated and forceps are put in there, and a limb of the baby in the womb is grabbed hold of. Steel forceps grab hold. They find a leg or they find an arm. They clamp down and they pull until it rips off. And they pull out the leg and they put it in the tray. And they go in again and they find the other leg. They pull and they rip it off and put it out. And then they go in for the arm. And then they pull that out. They pull out the other arm. And then they go in and crush the skull and suck it out. Now, if this doesn't turn your stomach, America, I don't know what does. And that we could be celebrating this in parts of the country is just not only tragic, it's barbaric, and it has to be stopped. So that's why here in Congress we are trying to pass the Born Alive Infant Protection Act to stand up and to say, we're better than this as a country. That's not what America's about. That our founders established this country and the basic rights of all who are created by our Creator, and that is the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we want to make sure every American can live out that American dream, the ones who have the privilege of being born and the ones that right now people are celebrating unborn. We want everybody to have that opportunity of life. And I call on all my colleagues and everyone across this country rise up and say, now is the time that we stop this and we set up a new path for America that values every life.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership and your courage. And what an expression of love and compassion and faith we just heard. The child who was thought to be impossible, but what a tribute to parents who just love and a mother who loves so unconditionally. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, two bioethicists, Dr. Alberto Gobellini and Francesca Minerva, published an outrageous paper in the Journal of Medical Ethics justifying the deliberate, premeditated murder of newborn babies during the first hours, days, and even weeks after birth. The ethicists said, when circumstances occur after birth, that what would have justified an abortion, what we call after-birth abortion, should be permissible. In other words, the same conditions that would justify the killing of a baby in utero justifies the killing of that baby even when she is born. These two individuals, made it clear that because a child does not have dreams about the future at birth, that somehow is a disqualifier to personhood. The infanticide that they proposed, Mr. Speaker, is here. After-birth abortion is here. A couple of weeks ago, New York Governor Cuomo signed into law a bill to allow abortion until birth and even removes penalties for infanticide. Other states, including Virginia, Rhode Island, and New Mexico, have similar anti-child statutes under consideration. The violent assault on children, Mr. Speaker, must end. Not only has 61 million unborn babies been killed since 1973 by either dismemberment, where the child is torn apart, arms and legs and torso, literally dismembered, or by chemical poisoning, a death toll that equates with the entire population of Italy. But the pro-choice crowd now is legislating to extend the violence after birth. Mr. Speaker, we cannot look away when a child's fundamental human rights are being violated with such lethal actions. Pass the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act now. Mr. Speaker, give us that chance to vote on this. I yield back.
I want to thank my good friend and colleague, the gentlelady from Indiana, Jackie Walorski. We are classmates and came in to Congress almost 7 years ago. I am so grateful to her for pulling this special order together tonight to talk about the most vulnerable in our society, talk about the right to life. The gentlelady from Washington State, and I have to say, your story moves us all, and we are so excited about your growing family. Ms. Roby, I cannot thank you for your support, your passion, your dignity when it comes to supporting life. All of my colleagues that are here with us tonight and stand with us on this legislation. And above all, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I believe our president last week at the National Prayer Breakfast said it best, and I quote, "All children, born and unborn, are made in the holy image of God, Every life is sacred, and every soul is a precious gift from heaven. None of us could say it any better than that. I never thought the time would come when I would have to actually argue and fight and debate and stand for providing health care to infants after they are born. And yet, here we are. There are apparently many legislators who believe it is okay to allow a child to die after it's been born. When I first heard the news of the state officials in New York and Virginia believing that it is acceptable to limit health care for newborns babies, I was horrified. But I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, it's not just in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the state of New York. In fact, only 26 states have affirmative protections for children born alive after attempted abortions. Only 26 states. And in fact, in recent days, Vermont, Rhode Island, and New Mexico are considering legislation to loosen the late-term abortion restrictions that have gone forward in Virginia and New York. In fact, New Mexico's House passed HB 51, which would effectively permit abortions up until birth and eliminate all restrictions thereafter. So, to me, it is unthinkable that a baby is born alive. Anyone's first instinct could be anything but to try to save that precious, innocent life by any means possible. Our babies are some of the most innocent, most vulnerable members of our society, and it is our responsibility, our duty, our calling to make sure that they are cared for. Every year, babies survive late-term abortions and are left to die on tables, in bedpans, in operating rooms. This should not happen in the United States of America. It is a flagrant violation of our Constitution and an offense against women and children. I implore my colleagues to support our bill, H.R. 962, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. And, Mr. Speaker, we will bring, for the next 25 days until we can put forward a discharge petition, we will bring the Born Alive Act and ask for unanimous consent that it be passed by the full House. This should not be in question. This is a piece of legislation that was passed in the 115th Congress. And we will do that the next 25 days until we can put together a discharge petition and force it to vote on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. Last week I was told when I offered the unanimous consent decree that it was the wrong time, I quote, to fight for the most basic of human rights. Well, Mr. Speaker, I say it is always the time to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. I ask my colleagues to join us in this fight for innocent newborn babies. I thank you, and I thank the gentlelady for her courage and her standing up for life, and I yield back.
I have long fought to defend the unborn, but I'm shocked that I now have to defend the right to life of newborn infants. These precious children are in peril, their rights are under attack, their lives are under attack, and this House has a responsibility to act. Tonight, the American people heard our call to action. It's time to vote on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Will the leadership of this House listen, or will the Democratic majority continue to allow this march toward legalized infanticide? If we don't send a strong message that every baby has been endowed by its creator with inalienable rights, that we are not defending the fundamental principles of the Constitution, if we don't protect these children from harm, we're abandoning the basic truth of our humanity. I want to thank my colleagues for standing with me here tonight. I urge the support of the House Bill H.R. 962, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, and to stand against infanticide. And, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Okay, friends, so thank you for watching this with me. You know, I wanted to show the whole range of speeches that were given by Republican members of the House of Representatives just last evening. Now, this is what's called a special order. That is a series of speeches focused on an important topic. And as you could see there, and I wanted you to see and experience the effect of hearing one after another of these elected representatives get up and, as you heard, in clear, passionate terms, sometimes with very moving personal stories, stand up for the babies in the womb and outside the womb, especially those that are being killed in those late stages of pregnancy and even after they are born. To see that these are our elected representatives standing up in the same way that we would, saying the same words that we would say, asking challenging questions like we would ask. You heard one of the representatives say, since when has murder become a partisan issue? Why is it that all of these that are speaking up for life are Republicans and no Democrats are standing up for this? We have only a handful that voted in the last Congress in favor of this law that they are proposing now to protect babies born alive after a failed abortion. Only a handful of Democrats voted for that. All the rest of them opposed it. Now understand what's going on here. This was a series of speeches given last night, but it's in the context of the Republican members of the House urging that the bill, which was passed in the House in the last Congress, didn't get through the Senate because, again, the blocking and the obstruction of the Democrats, but in the House it was passed. Now the House is under Democrat control, and the Republicans in the House are saying, let's have a vote on this bill again, and the Democrats are blocking it. So what they have decided to do is each day, and they've done it now for 5 days, they're going to do it for another 25 days. Each day, one of the representatives is going to get up and using, this is all governed by very specific rules in the House of Representatives. So it gets a little bit complicated. But basically understand what they're going to do is they're utilizing every rule that the Congress provides to stand up, and they're going to call for what is called unanimous consent. They're just going to call on the House, let's have a vote on this very important issue. Again, the issue is protecting babies born alive after a failed abortion. It's called the Abortion Survivors Protection Act. And so far, the Democrats have blocked it each of the days that it has been brought up, but we're going to see now if they're going to continue blocking it for 25 days straight, and this will have its impact if, and only if, you and I bring this to the attention of our fellow citizens. That's why I'm showing this to you today, because you and I need to bring this to the attention of our fellow citizens. The issue itself and the obstruction by the Democratic members of the House of Representatives. The only other reason I wanted to show you this, you see the kind of people we need to elect. When we talk about elections and electing pro-life representatives, it's not something abstract. It's something very, very concrete. It results in the kind of speeches that you just heard. It's so inspiring and it's so encouraging. And it's encouraging to hear as they phrase it when they give these speeches, I rise to speak on behalf of the unborn. I rise to speak on behalf of a bill that would protect these children born alive. As they rise, we must rise. In fact, it's more accurate to say they are rising not only because they believe this is right, they are rising because you and I rise. Our elected representatives work for us, not the other way around. Let's continue to rise and speak up for these children so that they, in the House of Representatives, can pass the right kinds of bills, and then also those who represent us in the Senate, and of course, put something on the President's desk that he is ready and willing to sign. Now, we're going to hear more in a few hours, actually, from the President, and I'm going to bring you those reports and that news as we get it. The President is ready to speak again and to act again on behalf of the unborn children. And I ask you to stay tuned during the course of the day because we'll have some updates for you. You may have seen how, first of all, last week, he spoke up for these unborn children in both the State of the Union address on Tuesday night and in the National Prayer Breakfast on Thursday morning. And he also spoke to Governor Cuomo of New York, who was at the White House to speak with him on another matter related to taxes. But the President also brought up the topic of abortion. and expressed his disapproval for this new law in New York that Cuomo signed, allowing abortion even more than it was allowed before, essentially right up until birth, and not even protecting the babies that are born alive. So this is really an important moment. We're going to have a lot more for you to do. In the meantime, sign up. As you saw the scrolling message during the course of these speeches, make sure you're signed up at stopabortionnow.org for our action alerts. And we have an action alert up there already to urge your representatives, and contact your senators too, and tell them the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act must be passed. You want to see it passed. And then stay tuned for more action alerts. We're going to send out an action alert about these speeches that you just saw. Spread them. Let others see them. One of the ways you can do that is just to share this Facebook video itself. But then thank each one of those representatives. You notice how, as they were speaking, C-SPAN put their Twitter handle right underneath their name. We should be using that. We'll send an action alert that also has those Twitter handles on it. We'll have them also on our website. But put those Twitter handles, take note of those Twitter handles, and send out a tweet. If you use Twitter, send out a tweet thanking those representatives, each one of them, for their speech, and encouraging them and telling them that you stand with them. That's so important to do so that they will see the support they have, not only in their own districts, but across the country. Sound good? Are you with us? You ready for action? Let's take it. And now I ask the Lord's blessing on you. May He strengthen you to be strong and effective advocates for the children in the womb, and even for those threatened after they are born. May He make you a voice for these children who cannot speak for themselves. And may He bless and protect you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father Frank Pavone here of Priests for Life. We'll talk to you later.
But you know what? When you and I take up this call and we talk about abortion, if we speak about it in church, we're told we're too political. If we speak about it in the political arena, we're told we're too religious. If we speak about it in the world of the media, it's too disturbing. In the world of business, it's too distracting. In the world of education, it's too controversial. In the streets, it's too disruptive. So abortion, if abortion is wrong, where do we go to say so? We go into the churches, we go into politics, into the media, into business, into education, and into the streets. Some churches haven't wanted to get involved in political hassles with the government, so they've been silent on abortion. They didn't want to get involved in hassles from the government. They didn't want to take the fight to the government. So now with the HHS mandate, the government took the fight to them. And when it comes to that mandate, we've got a simple message. We will obey God rather than men. As Alveda can tell us, her uncle said one day to the civil rights movement, we've got a lot of obstacles in our way, but we're not going to let anything turn us around. We're not going to let no dogs turn us around, no water hoses turn us around, no police clubs or jail sentences, and we're not going to let any injunctions turn us around. And so today I say to you, in the pro-life movement, no Planned Parenthood is going to turn us around. No biased media is going to turn us around. No HHS mandate is going to turn us around. No Obama